I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon in Manhattan. My name is Dr. Michael Preston, and I'd built a life I once thought was stable, a beautiful wife, Sarah, and a career that others envied. But at 46 years old, in one November week, I would see how fragile that stability really was. It started with a nagging unease during a busy Tuesday morning in the hospital. I was hunched over an open chest cavity, listening to a patient's heart, and I realized my own heart was pounding for a reason entirely different. Sarah had been acting strange lately, distracted and tense. I shuddered as I realized I hadn't seen her smile in days, and every text message from her came late at night. My head throbbed. Something in our marriage was shifting beneath me, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that it wasn't stress or boredom. Later that day, I met my new assistant, Lucas Landry, in the staff lounge for a quick consult. Lucas was a tall, energetic 29-year-old newly minted MD, eager and funny, always lightening the mood with a joke or a quick quip. He noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "You look like hell, Mike," he said softly, pouring me a coffee. His warm eyes peered for answers that I couldn't even form. I wasn't ready to unload anything personal, especially at work, so I forced a laugh. "Just pulled a lot of late nights, Lucas. You know how it is." He nodded understandingly, but left it at that. We had to discuss the Anderson case, the middle-aged man on the table ready for bypass. Despite his youthful appearance, Lucas was a sharp clinician, and we talked shop, perfusions, bypass techniques, patient vitals, anything to distract me from the storm brewing at home. But between sutures and billing codes, my mind kept drifting back to Sarah. It all began a few days earlier when she had asked for space. On Sunday night, she told me over dinner that she felt trapped in our life and needed to find herself again. I had sat there stunned, fork halfway to my mouth. She looked at me with a mix of guilt and determination, tears in her eyes. I had been too shocked to respond, so I just said, "Okay." I kissed her forehead and we moved on. But those words haunted me. Now, in the parking lot after surgery, I stared at my car's reflection in the polished taillight. The city glimmered around me. Was she really unhappy? Or were there someone else's thoughts in those eyes of hers? My stomach knotted with anxiety. I locked the car and drove home in a daze. By midnight on Wednesday, I had already started piecing together digital clues without her noticing. Sarah had accidentally left her phone on the kitchen counter one afternoon when she went for a shower. I held the device in my hand for a heartbeat, the glow of the screen catching my eye. It was unlocked, perhaps from me grabbing it to call her once or twice while she was in another room. Then I saw it. A text message preview from a contact named Ethan Parker. The words on the screen said, "Can't wait to see you later, babe." My breath caught in my throat. Babe? Our daughter's cat was named Babe, but she'd never send a message like that about a cat. And "see you later" at 10:45 in the evening. I froze. My knuckles whitened. When Sarah stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped around her and hair dripping, I quickly locked the phone and pretended nothing happened. She must have noticed my silence. Her eyes searched my face. "You okay?" she asked. The casual tone made it clear she was hiding something too. I murmured that I was fine, setting the phone back where it was, face down. My mind raced as I tried to calm the storm inside me. She walked by and brushed against me, whispering, "I love you." But her voice had an edge of nervousness I'd never heard before. We went to bed early, and I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Who was Ethan Parker? The corner of her lips smiled in the dim light as she finally fell asleep. But I lay there cold and silent, unable to sleep. The next day at work, I was a ghost. Lucas noticed at lunch. We sat in the canteen of the hospital, bright lights, nurses in scrubs, patients being wheeled past, and I sipped tea without tasting it. He nudged me, concerned. "Mike, talk to me. You look like you got hit by a bus, man." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. So I lied smoothly, as if practicing. "Work has me crushed, Lucas. I'm fine, really." He gave me a skeptical look, but accepted that as truth. We returned to the operating room, but my hands were shaky when I held the forceps. I had to double-check every reflection on the screen. The deeper suspicion gnawed at me. After work, I went home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet. I crept down the hallway to Sarah's study. It was a rare sight to see her laptop still awake. My heart thudded. I had to know more. With trembling fingers, I opened the device. It was locked behind a password, but I saw her sticky note. Pulse Cafe 185. It was the number of our first clinic, I remembered. Slowly, I typed it in. Click. There it was. Her email, her desktop. I spotted the IM app icon glowing with unread messages from that very Ethan Parker. I clicked it open, hands sweating. A conversation window appeared and I devoured words that I never wanted to see. The chat log was a punch to the gut. Phrases scrolled by in rapid conversation. "Ethan, I miss you. Last night was too short." "Sarah, I know. I feel so guilty every time, but I love it. I love him." "Ethan, he had no idea, right? Smart move. We're smart." "Sarah, yes, we're so cautious. Don't worry, my home is just Sarah's home. That's what they'll think." "Ethan, I'll pick you up tomorrow night. Our spot, 8 p.m. Sarah, 8 p.m. I can't wait. You're the only one who makes me feel alive." My stomach turned. The words "I love him" screamed between the lines. This Ethan Parker was her lover. The mention of our spot and their careful planning confirmed it was more than one drunken hookup. It was an ongoing affair. My heart sank so deep I felt nauseated. I knew there was no misunderstanding now. The digital evidence was explicit, undeniable. I sat back in my chair, breathing hard. Anger flared up, white-hot, then plummeted back into grief. Betrayal, a feeling beyond words, coiled in my chest. I slipped away from the computer and fled the study before she came home. I needed air. That evening, I walked the sidewalks of the Upper West Side for hours, past brownstones and the quiet hum of a November night. I tried to catch my thoughts, but they were spinning in torment. What would she do if I confronted her now? Maybe I could salvage things, talk to her with what I knew. But a small voice whispered that I might only be gathering more scraps of lies. I felt drowning in doubt. Maybe she would say it was my fault, that I'd been too busy with work. Or maybe she would cry and make everything about me. But deep down I knew that Babe in that message was not about our cat. That weekend, I gathered more proof. Saturday afternoon, when Sarah went out for a yoga class, I found her credit card bill on the kitchen counter with a living room pile of mail. There it was, a charge at 2:15 a.m. on Friday at the Corinthian Hotel, a luxury spot on 52nd Street. I hadn't gifted her a hotel room recently. I hadn't even gone there. The charge was in her name. My hands trembled as I dialed the hotel's phone number. A sleepy voice answered. I lied, pretending it was for a friend's reservation, and managed to get them to confirm the purchaser. Sure enough, it was her name on record. My throat went dry. So late on a Thursday, She said she'd been at home. Then I scrolled through dates and discovered this wasn't a one-off. There were multiple late-night charges, restaurant dinners, a spa booking in Brooklyn. None of these lined up with any stories she'd told me. By Sunday night, I had enough. Sarah was sitting at our dinner table, nervously stirring iced tea. I sat across from her in silence for a long moment. Finally, I slid her phone across the table as if casually. "Our phone bill came today," I said quietly. "We have thousands of texts between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. with this Ethan Parker. Our cell shows a bunch of calls and texts, most of them in the middle of the night. Apparently, you had a lot to talk about." I kept my voice flat. Her face went pale. Sarah's hair was pinned up, blush in the curve of her cheek. She dropped her spoon clattering into her glass. "Michael," she whispered. In that word, I heard guilt and fear. She had no answer prepared. I waited, silence filling the room. "It's not what you think," she finally said, but there was a shake in her voice. "There's an explanation," she said lamely. My chest tightened. "What is there to explain? You've been sleeping with Ethan Parker for the past 2 months. I found everything. The texts, the calls, even your hotel charges." I laid out the receipts on the table, letting them slide in front of her. Her eyes filled with tears and anger. "Yes, okay. Maybe I was with him at night. I needed something, Michael." Her words cracked with betrayal that cut deeper than anything I felt. I stared at the woman I loved, realizing our marriage was over in an instant. She stood abruptly, shuffling toward me. "Michael, listen. We can fix this. We can make it right. I was going to end it, I swear." The lie in her voice was so raw. Why would she lie to me? I was more furious than I'd ever been. Make it right? By dating someone behind my back? By lying to me every single day? I raised my voice and she flinched. I hated yelling at her, but I couldn't contain it anymore. She began to cry softly, reaching out to take my hand across the table. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I love you," she sobbed. I let her words wash over me without believing them. "Love? You didn't love me at all," I spat. "You used the fact that I was busy and faithful to hide this. Did it feel good, Sarah? Did it feel good sleeping with him behind my back?" She looked away, ashamed. "You deserve better," she murmured. I laughed bitterly. Better than me? I had a better life. Now I'm going to watch it burn. I stood up, my chair scraping back hard. "You can pack your things. I'm done. Don't come back." She was shaking now, panic on her face. "Please, Michael," I cut her off. "Get out." And just like that, I turned and left the room. That night, I didn't sleep. A cold despair gripped me, followed by a rage so intense it roared in my ears. I sat alone on our sofa, the city lights falling silent through the window. I felt helpless and furious in equal parts. I replayed every moment of our life, the dinners, the vacations, the evenings we planned, wondering which one had been a lie. My mind kept returning to the digital evidence, the texts, the calls, the charges. Each was a confirmation of her betrayal. I had a small smile that barely touched my lips. At least now I knew the truth. But with it came another feeling, a resolve. She thought I'd be broken, that I'd sit at home crying and begging. But I was wrong. It wasn't time for tears. It was time to decide what to do next. On Monday, I returned to work with a grim determination. The elevator doors opened at the hospital's cardiology floor, and I stepped off with my head held high. Lucas was waiting for me at the nurse's station. He saw the look in my eyes and raised an eyebrow. I offered him a tight, strained smile and a thumbs up. He clapped me on the shoulder, smiling. "All right, Doc. Ready to tackle the day?" I nodded and headed to the OR. Through the morning cases, I was composed and professional, but on edge. Every beep of the heart monitor jarred nerves. After a 12-hour triple bypass, I barely had time to grab coffee between patients. Lucas found me in the corridor late in the day. "Hey, I know we talked about the surgery, but are you sure you're all right?" he asked quietly, careful not to draw attention. I took a deep breath. It was time to tell someone, even in coded terms. "Lucas, I'm dealing with something serious at home," I said, voice low. "I have enough evidence to cut bait." Lucas looked at me, alarmed. He must have caught bits of my conversation with Sarah about divorce, or maybe seen my texts ordering boxes and storage bags. "I'm so sorry, Mike," he murmured softly. "If there's anything I can do—" "Just keep it between us for now, okay?" I interrupted gently, feeling the weight of the secret. He nodded, hurt and concern in his eyes. "Sure, but talk to someone. Don't bottle it up." I gave him a grateful nod. Lucas had never experienced anything like this, but he had the empathy of a brother. "Thanks, Lucas, I will." In the hallway, I discreetly found a quiet corner to sit at a computer terminal. I needed to tie up loose ends and plan next moves. I logged into our joint cloud storage. The folder of screenshots from my wife's phone was now neatly organized. Texts, call logs, and even photos of them together at dinner. There was even a photo she had taken of Ethan's apartment, with the morning sun and part of him in the frame. I copied everything onto an encrypted drive I had stashed in my medical bag. I would need proof if she tried to deny it, though at this point I doubted she would. That afternoon, I called the hospital's HR department under the pretense of getting some documents prepared. I asked HR to pull any relevant hospital records about patient confidentiality violations and any code of conduct issues involving staff. It was a ruse. I didn't actually intend to report Sarah to the board. I just wanted to gather what I could, from a paper trail standpoint. If she was a teacher, not hospital staff, this might be useless. But I was hooked on using official channels to help later. I also secretly fired off a quick email to a tech-savvy friend, Eric, whom I trusted since medical school. The email: "Need help with some phone logs. Max urgency. Need your discretion." This was a test. I needed to confirm the digital thing was working, and maybe get technical help in case I needed more digging. I kept it on the down low, not wanting to involve outside people too soon. The thought of other people discovering this had my stomach in knots. That night, at home in the apartment now half-packed, Sarah came storming in, wheeling a suitcase. "Michael, where are you?" she shouted from the foyer. I was in the kitchen, balancing a glass of scotch in one hand as I pretended to be reading on my tablet. I didn't flinch at her cry. When she saw me, her face went white. "I thought you said you wanted space," she accused, tears welling. I paused my screen and took a slow sip of my drink. "Yes, I thought I was done," I said smoothly. "I'm just having one more drink before I leave for good." "When you're packed, I guess you should go." Her eyes flared. "You can't just do this. We have a life together. You don't get to kick me out." Anger now, finally. I stood and faced her across the countertop. "I'm not kicking you out, Sarah. You're free to stay. In fact, I want you to feel comfortable. Feel free to come home whenever you like. Just don't expect me to be here." The facade was cold. Her lip quivered. "I'll make this up to you," she pleaded. "I can fix this. Let me fix this. Don't throw me away." She took a shaky step forward. I casually brushed by her to open the fridge. "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed," I said, pulling out a water bottle. "I'm thirsty. Please pack quietly," I continued in an even tone, toasting the water bottle casually as if it were a celebratory champagne. "It'll make everything easier." Her face crumpled. In that moment, I played the part of the wounded, drifting spouse extremely well. She saw me as defeated, nearly begging her to leave, and I realized how convincingly I had sold it. She nodded hesitantly and left to continue packing, crying softly in the bedroom. I heard her murmuring angry curses to herself. Perfect. Once she was in her room alone, I sent a brief text to Ethan Parker's number, pretending to be from Sarah. She said you two had a ton of fun. Good, it's done. In that moment, I flashed on how naive and cocky her lover must be to think he'd actually get away with destroying my marriage. Game on, I thought. Over the next 2 weeks, my plan took shape, carried out in slices of time between surgeries and sleepless nights. I kept my transformation hidden behind the veneer of normalcy. At work, Lucas remarked that I seemed oddly peaceful. "I'm taking a sabbatical next month," I confided in him one late afternoon as we scrubbed out from a long case. "Going to Europe. Need a change of scenery." Lucas raised an eyebrow, surprised. It was a lie. One layer of my act. I told him the solo trip would let me clear my head. He accepted it, telling me I deserved it. Meanwhile, I enacted the real plan. First, I began anonymously tipping off people in her social circle. Sarah had a few close friends, and I managed to text them from an unknown number, saying I'd been cheated on and something needed to be exposed. They initially ignored it, but I kept pushing small hints, leaving a USB thumb drive on her doorstep with supposed nasty files, writing cryptic notes. All of it arranged to make her and her lover start getting nervous. Rumors began filtering through their circle. People commented on social media that something's off with Sarah, and Ethan's been awfully quiet on Instagram. I watched Sarah panic. She called Ethan nightly, pleading to know who knew and how to stop the whispers, but I kept my distance. Second, I struck at their careers. Sarah taught at a private school uptown. I wrote a detailed letter to the principal over email from a fake parent. Subject: concerns about Miss Preston. I praised her at first, but then said I had seen troubling behavior that suggests Mrs. Preston may not uphold the values we expect. Attached, please find evidence, which was my collection of their messages and photos. The principal had no choice but to review it. By the next morning, an urgent faculty meeting was called. Sarah was summoned to the principal's office and learned that an anonymous complaint had made all her colleagues suspicious. The quiet whispers turned to outright looks. She emerged from the meeting white-faced. Meanwhile, I didn't stop there. Ethan was a yoga instructor at a boutique studio downtown. I paid off one of the studio's instructors to share that a teacher had been romantically involved with a new client in a way that might be against studio policy. A rumor quickly spread there. By the end of that week, Ethan's studio had started an internal review. Social destruction meant more than just jobs. It meant stripping away support. I discreetly contacted her family under the guise of a concerned friend and hinted at a public scandal. Her father, a conservative man, caught wind of the affair and called her in on the pretext of a family meeting. When Sarah arrived, he asked flatly, "Is any of that affair rumor true?" She stammered it away, but the damage was done. Her parents now viewed her as a liar. I also targeted mutual friends. We had couples we socialized with occasionally. I wrote one old friend, Marisol, with a heartfelt "I'm sorry" letter, confessing nothing explicit but enough to make her question any sympathy for Sarah. She immediately took Marisol's side and stopped answering Sarah's calls. In every phone and email, I cultivated the whisper network that would leave Sarah isolated. I even created a fake Facebook page of an investigative journalist exposing cheating society wives, hinting at Sarah's name in a local scandal. Every day, Sarah found herself looking around and realizing fewer people were in her corner, and more were against her. On the rare instances I responded in person, I remained calm and polite. She looked at me once at the hospital cafeteria, terrified. I simply stared right through her and spoke softly to Lucas about the operation. All the while, I was relentlessly watching them implode. One Friday morning, I found Sarah in the hallway, tears running down her face as she tried to apply makeup in the school restroom mirror. Without a word, I slipped quietly into the stall next door and listened to her. She was on the phone with Ethan, hysterical. "They know, Ethan. The whole world knows. I lost my job. My parents disowned me. The police are involved at my school. I'm finished." She sobbed uncontrollably. She didn't see me when I stepped out after her call. Tears in my own eyes this time. But tears of cold satisfaction. The plan was working beyond what I expected. By the third week, I planned the final act. I decided on a slow Saturday afternoon for our climax, a day when I knew both would be unprepared. I called Sarah at 2 p.m. "It's Michael. I have something to show you at my office." She answered shakily, "Michael, I'm not sure—" But I cut her off. "Just come. It's time. Bring Ethan if you need him." My voice was flat and controlled. She didn't argue, just thanked me weakly, maybe suspecting, but too shocked to think. I hung up and went to the conference room on the 8th floor. It was a small private lounge we sometimes used to discuss family cases. I also used it to study journals on the quiet weekends. Inside, I had already arranged the incriminating slideshow on the big screen, a series of photo montages I put together from hotel keycard photos, the text screenshots, and even a few headshots of Sarah and Ethan together that I'd taken by standing near their table at a cafe. All this I found carefully via my invested hacker friend and some opportunistic snaps. It was all queued up as a fake new research data I was going to present. Yet another lie. As Sarah and Ethan walked in, both looking nervous and hesitant, Ethan glancing around warily, I invited them to sit. "I wanted us all to talk openly," I said, still feigning weakness from the past weeks. "I'm done pretending." My mouth twisted into a grim half-smile. They sat facing me. I locked the door behind them. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed. Ethan's face was expressionless, but his body was rigid, suspicion in his posture. I acted as though I was sorry and ready to say goodbye politely. "You two must be anxious," I said softly, not meeting their eyes, fingering the remote control. "Let's make it quick." I put together some memories of the last 6 months to remind us of what really happened. Before either could understand, I clicked, and the screen flickered to life. The slides advanced automatically. First came our wedding photo, dissolving into snapshots. Sarah and Ethan sitting close at dinner, smiling at a party, leaning toward each other. Then texts popped up on the screen. "I love you. We'll show them what true love is." Each frame hung a moment. They gasped quietly, while Sarah clutched Ethan's hand. I locked eyes with Ethan at one point. He was pale. "This is our story as it really was," I continued, voice steady. "I thought you should see the full picture. These are all receipts, all messages, all the proof I gathered. This is our divorce, scribbled out in social data, not in court transcripts." I pressed play on a final slide. A collage of news posts and social media comments I had anonymously seeded. some calling out their names outright. Beneath each image, bold red letters, exposed cheaters. Ethan sputtered, "Michael, what the hell?" And Sarah's face twisted in agony. She had realized it all this time, but to see it publicly thrown back in her face. "See," I said firmly, "you made it public already. Everyone now knows. When I said I'd burn it all down, I meant it." My voice cracked a hint, performing the hurt. They began to tremble, glaring at me with eyes full of fear and fury. Ethan stood abruptly, anger blazing. "You son of a—" He lunged at me, but I anticipated and sidestepped. He ended up slamming into the table. Sarah screamed, collapsing into a sob. "This is it," I said calmly. "You're finished, both of you. No one will ever trust you again." I stepped closer, dropping my tone. "I gave you a chance to disappear quietly, but you preferred to make it a spectacle. Fine." Their roles reversed. Now they were caught, unable to hide. Outside, the hall was silent, but it didn't matter. They already knew everyone would soon know. Ethereal retribution had arrived. I glanced at the slideshow title, "The True Story." It flickered in the dim light. I had cleaned my conscience. Now they had no mantle of privacy left. Then I turned off the screen, looked them dead in the eyes, and said softly, "I hope you enjoy what you've done, because you don't have any life left here." I unlocked the door and stepped out of the conference room, leaving them shouting behind me. No rescue would come. I knew their argument would go nowhere. Outside, my assistant Lucas was waiting in the hallway. I gave him a subtle nod and walked past. A nurse paused to say hello as she passed. I nodded politely at both. Everything was unfolding just as planned. Within days, the fallout was complete. By Monday morning, headlines from local media, picked up from the anonymous tips I had arranged, had Sarah Preston's face plastered on the gossip blogs with labels like cheater and homewreckers. The private school had officially terminated her employment for ethical misconduct. Sarah was figuratively running from phone to phone trying to patch the pieces of her life. Each friend confirmation, just another heartbreak. She was stranded at her parents' house that she had fled to. They refused to take calls now. Ethan found out on Tuesday that his yoga studio dismissed him after the administrative review. One of Ethan's former girlfriends called and ended things as soon as she saw his name in those posts. He was alone, angry, and penniless, and I was content. As the sky turned orange in the New York morning, and I walked out of the hospital late Tuesday, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Sarah and Ethan had been left with only the biting truth. Strangers on the street sneered when their names came up in snippets. Their carefully constructed reputations were destroyed. Nothing was left but shame. At my favorite coffee cart that afternoon, the barista even gave me a sympathetic glance and a free biscotti. "Heard about the Preston thing, Doc. Must have been tough," she said quietly as she handed me my cappuccino. I just smiled enigmatically. Back home, the apartment was eerily silent. Sarah's belongings had been moved out by noon. It stood empty and clean. I poured myself a neat drink and leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at the cityscape. The skyline glowed beyond the window, oblivious to my turmoil. I allowed myself a deep exhale, tasting sweet closure on my tongue. Revenge. The word tasted as bitter as whiskey, but it was mine now. In the evenings that followed, I sat with Lucas at the bar by our building. He raised a glass to me in a quiet toast. He didn't need to say anything. The verdict was clear on my face. I nodded once, not drunk but fully aware. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, boss?" he asked softly. I sighed. "I will be," I said. "But truthfully, I wasn't sure if I would ever fully be okay again. The illusion of trust had shattered. He understood. "At least it's finally over," Lucas said. And it was. All traces of Sarah and Ethan's affair were out in the open, their worlds laid to ashes. The next morning, I woke up early and stood on the terrace. A cold breeze tousled my hair. The city was waking up. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Ethan were hiding in the silence, knowing they had nothing left. I held my hot coffee cup to warm my hands, and I thought, we destroyed their world. They'll spend the rest of their lives staring at these ashes. I set the cup down, straightened my shoulders, and took in the sunrise over Manhattan. Ahead of me lay quiet mornings of solitude and work. No more hiding, no more lies. The plan had executed flawlessly. I was free.